Good evening, Hadley Wood, and welcome back to our very first HWJC live conversation of 2021. I'm very excited for this one, actually, to be able to speak to Jonathan Sands, a great member of our community. Jonathan and I have just had the longest pre-talk that I've ever had with our guest before, and it's fascinating. It was fascinating for me to hear about Jonathan's story. So I'm really excited to be able to share that with all of you as well. Hope everyone is doing well. One thing I'd like to say, by the way, is please do feel free to comment, to ask questions, to say whatever you want to say. If you're watching on YouTube, in the comments box on YouTube, if you're watching on Facebook, in the comments on Facebook, we'd love to hear from you as well. Please do share what you've been observing, share your thoughts as well, and I'll hopefully be able to address them and bring them up on the screen as well. I don't want to keep Jonathan waiting too much longer. So Jonathan, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining us. How are you doing, Jonathan?
I'm very well, thank you, Rabbi. Thank you very much for inviting me on. Very nice.
Pleasure. Thank you for coming on as well. So as mentioned, there's a lot that you can share with us this evening. You've had a fascinating life, and there's much more of your life to live, please God, as well. So please do share with us, Jonathan, where it all began. You've been involved in London film. You've been involved with Harry Potter, with Star Wars, with James Bond. Where did that all begin? How did you get involved with all this stuff?
Okay, so it's obviously going to be quite difficult to squeeze 30 years of my career, more ups and downs, hopefully, in 30 minutes. So I'll give it a good crack. But essentially, it all started with this.
Yeah, we can see that.
This camera here.
Yeah.
Which at the age of 12 years old, I purchased from the HWJC.
What's a camera, Jonathan? I forgot. What is a camera? Isn't it on this thing over here? Is that...
Well, once upon a time, we used to have a thing called film, So some people may or may not remember that we used to have film in our cameras back in the day. But essentially, I ended up as a trained photographer. I after school, I went to study photography in Luton, along with film studies. And armed with my diploma, I ended up working for a photographic studio in Queensbury, where it's more commercial photography. So I would photograph catalogues and products and all that kind of thing. But I was also fascinated with the whole process. So whether it was, processing film, producing catalogues and brochures. And I was also always fascinated with the whole business and the whole sort of agency business. Mm-hmm. But I ended up as a photographer at Elstree Film Studios. Essentially, it was my father who rose the interest of photography around the house, because he was an avid camera collector. Mm-hmm. And he used to sort of buy and sell cameras back in the day, and they were always around. So it was something that I sort of picked up. My father was a jeweler. And I didn't really want to sort of go into, I didn't have really sort of much interest in jewellery, but I had an interest in photographing jewellery. And what I used to do is I used to photograph my father's jewellery, some of his products. Some of his friends used to have jewellery shops and businesses, and I used to photograph their jewellery. And, earn like 20, 30 pounds, something like that, just to take the pictures. But from a very early age, I learned that for me, photography equaled money. So it was an ability. It was like kind of means to an end. And once I studied photography and I went into it more professionally, we ended up setting a studio up in Barnet, and eventually ended up at a studio at Elstree, at the film studios, because it was very expensive to have photographic studios in central London. So the opportunity arose to have a studio very close to, or in the Elstree studios, which gave me an address. So that sort of kicked that off, and I ended up meeting somebody that owns a prop company, and he was a young man by the name of Nick Harrison, owns a company called Weird and Wonderful Limited, and I met him at the tenants meeting at Elstree Studios. And I thought, this is brilliant. A company called Weird and Wonderful Limited. Yeah. I don't care what they do. Sounds brilliant. So I ended up becoming very, very, very good friends with him. And over the years, I worked very, very closely with him. And what he essentially did is he had a prop hire business. So he, at the end of films. So when films are taking place, they purchase a lot of assets, furniture, set pieces, and at the end of the film, they sell them off. And Nick would invariably buy this stuff very, very cheaply, and he'd rehire them to new productions. So I thought this was great. It's like a big sort of steptoe and son, if you like. And it was recycling back in the day when recycling wasn't the thing, but who knew? So he introduced me to quite a lot of producers, and in fact, he introduced me to the producers of Star Wars. But even back then, I'm talking 1996, 1997. And unfortunately, in 1998, Nick contracted non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, and he was very poorly. And unfortunately, the age of 37, in the year 2000, he passed away.
Wow.
And the family was sort of a bit lost as to what to do with the business. My father was working with me at the time. He was speaking to the father, Nick's late Nick's father, and I kind of said, well, you know, I always worked with Nick. We always had these kind of visions of doing stuff together. You know, I could take it on. You know, it had some debt and what have you, but had this big warehouse full of props. So we did a deal, and that was kind of like the start, if you like, into a different world and a progression into a different world. And I ended up, rather than renting the props to productions, I ended up creating attractions and themed events. So I'd theme everything, put all these props into different themes, medieval, science fiction, that sort of thing, and we'd sell them to either theme parks for scare attractions and all that kind of stuff. And I sort of got known for sort of having the ability to design these attractions, and I guess that's where I kind of got the bug. In 2005, Lucasfilm, who were the company behind the Star Wars franchise run by George Lucas, were holding an event in Monaco. And I got invited to Monaco to bring a lot of our sets and props to this event. And I ended up, to cut a long story short, I ended up in the VIP area and sitting with George Lucas and the then producer Rick McCullum. And they were sort of talking about the props that were on display. And they were, you know, we were talking about things. They were talking about the 30th anniversary, which was coming up for Star Wars, which was to be in 2007, a couple of years after Monaco. After Monaco, I get a phone call from the offices of Lucasfilm to say that they'd like to pay me a visit. So they flew over from San Francisco, met me in my offices, and they said to me that they would like me to operate and manage the Star Wars exhibition in London if I could find the location. So this exhibition comprised of all the original artifacts from the Lucasfilm archive, going back to the beginning of the Star Wars franchise, which was A New Hope back in '77. So some very, very, very valuable artifacts that could be on display that people would pay to come and see. So I had a friend who was an agent, a commercial agent in London, and they put me in touch with the owners of County Hall, which is right by the London Eye, the ex-home of the Greater London Council, the GLC, where Ken Livingstone used to reside, but it was now in private hands. And the space that I got offered was the ex-first floor of the Saatchi Gallery, where the Saatchi Gallery used to be. 50,000 square foot, sprawling space, very iconic, perfect for an exhibition. So I ended up doing this deal for 6 months license. That's all, a 6 months deal where the landlord could have a percentage. And essentially, I opened on May the 4th, which is a very important date in the Star Wars calendar, because May the 4th be with you, May the 4th be with you, I thought would be a lucky date to open.
Yeah.
And the rest was history. We opened this exhibition. It ended up running on a further 3 months to the original 6. And with that, the owners of County Hall turned around to me and said, look, you've made this first floor of County Hall, which was essentially a very quiet space. And it's very tricky to ask the public to go up to first floors or go down to basements. But we had such a big brand, Star Wars, that thousands of people came, and they they basically offered me a 25-year lease on this space, and I was like 33 at the time. And it was a huge gamble. And what was I going to do with it anyway? Star Wars was moving on.
Yeah, exactly. An exhibition is temporary.
Exhibition is temporary. So I'd always had in the back of my mind, whilst I had all this sort of prop company and sort of different ideas with different companies, that if I had the right space, I would like to have my own film museum. Now, I was very involved with various organisations, whether it's Film London, British Film Institute, various sort of governing bodies to do with film, and it was a real passion of mine, and it was something that I had these props, I had all access to other archives, and essentially opened the London Film Museum. About 4 months later, I scrambled all this stuff into this space, and I then started to put it in some sort of order. So the film studios, how films are made, various UK productions, the British Film Institute, so sort of flying the flag for different organisations, inviting schools down, and sort of retrofitting an educational programme. And that was in 2008. And the space was kind of tricky at County Hall. And in 2010, I got offered another space. Who knew that when you have a museum, you get offered more museums? I got offered this other space. It's like the 107 bus, two come at the same time. So I got offered this space in Covent Garden, which was yet to be developed. And it was the desire of the landlords to open part of the building as a restaurant, but Westminster Council wouldn't let them just change this D1 cultural space into a restaurant. So they said, look, if you could find a cultural partner who would take the rest of the building, we would split the usage on this building. So that's what happened. And in November 2010, Westminster granted permission for a film museum to exist in Covent Garden. So we thought, we've got this big space at County Hall, big space in Covent Garden. I had what I missed out was when I was at County Hall, I'd met somebody that was going to be my partner pretty much to date. And this gentleman was called Rick Sennett. And Rick, I'd met in, I think it was sort of 2010. So I'd already opened the film museum, but I got introduced to him. And he was the ex-head of business affairs for Warner Brothers. So a pretty serious executive, since retired. And he had time on his hands. He was working with a cinema company, Film Education of England. And I said, look, I'd love you to be involved. And we got very friendly. Rick is older than myself, although turns out we had gone to the same boarding school at Mill Hill, although a few years apart. Rick's nearly 70 now. And he essentially helped me officialize this film museum, because when you start as a private entity in the world of museums, which is essentially, normally quite institutional traditionally, and it's government funded and all this sort of private individual wants to open this stuff. Not only, you would have to be slightly off center to open a film museum. Let me tell you, it's not for the faint-hearted. It's going to use up all your money, and you're not necessarily going to come out with it retired. So
it's a gamble.
Yeah, it is a big gamble, and I remortgaged and all this sort of stuff at the time. But what it did was lead to lots of different things. We opened this film museum, and the organizations come on board. Once you open it, all these people start to come on board. And I ended up meeting who was to become one of my mentors, and he was a gentleman called Leslie Hardcastle, OBE. He'd created something called the Museum of the Moving Image, MOMI, on the South Bank, and that had won like 10 international awards. And Leslie is like now 96 or something, but he taught me how to curate properly and militarily. He was like really military about how to organize a production when you were doing an exhibition. And we ended up producing the Charlie Chaplin exhibition together, the Ray Harryhausen exhibition. Ray was like the grandfather of special effects, Clash of the Titans, Jason and the Argonauts, stop motion and all that kind of stuff. And he opened lots of different doors. So, with these kind of mentors and support, it was very, it was starting to become very official. At the same time, we got a phone call from Network Rail in King's Cross, and the landlords at King's Cross said that we've been trying to find somebody that can help us with this platform 9 3/4 that seems to have got a little bit popular. Now, this is after the last film of the franchise had come out, which I think was like 2011 or something, and this was now sort of 2012, and they had placed the handle of a trolley through the wall at King's Cross Station themselves, and fans would invariably find this handle and photograph themselves jumping as if they're going through the trolley. And if people don't know, platform 9 3/4 is where Harry Potter has to travel between the platforms to get to the platform 9 3/4, where he gets the Hogwarts Express to go to Hogwarts and go to school. So Network Rail, in their wisdom, thought it would be great to have a shop here. And we got found as the people that might be able to help. So I said, yes, you have sort of 20 people a day come and see the trolley. It's not really that popular, but I think we might be able to do something. If you let us a shop space, we would like the rights over the trolley. And the thinking of that was that I wanted to take a photograph of people at the trolley and use it as a product in the shop that people could buy. The author wasn't that excited about that.
J.K. Rowling.
Up to then, and we were in touch with her representation at the time. Remember, Rick was an executive of Warner Brothers involved with the franchise, and also involved with JK, and made lots of introductions. And she was a little bit reticent about charging for that trolley, because up to then people could do it for free and it become this fun thing. So I said, that's fine, we can continue that on. But what if we took an elevated photograph, one of them, looking like they're flying, a scarf flying, and if that's something they wanted to buy, they're not compelled to buy it, but at least they come into the shop. That was kind of like the start of everything. And funny enough, it's my father who found a little factory in Barnet. So that trolley in King's Cross that you see was made in a little factory in Barnet. But
wait, you didn't take the same trolley that they had there already? You made a new one?
No, because they just had a handle.
And you put a trolley in there.
I physically split a trunk in half and a birdcage in half, which, by the way, I challenge any of our viewers to try splitting a wire birdcage in half. It will fall apart, right? And make it look like it's half going through the wall.
Here was me thinking they just made half a birdcage, not that they made it.
No. So here's this trolley. Here's this shop. Shop opens December 14th, 2012. And the rest was history, because that shop ended up welcoming over 1 million people a year. And we ended up expanding it. We ended up with a shop at Heathrow and Gatwick. And in that time, I also got offered the franchise for The Cursed Child, which was the play. And the opportunity was to retail and to do all the merchandise. But the producers and the author didn't want just regular show merchandise, because we were involved. By that time, we had created ourselves hundreds and hundreds of products that were sold at King's Cross as well. What I didn't mention was when we opened the shop in 2012, there was very little Harry Potter product available. There was very few licensees, which is the way film companies work. So we had to develop our own products. And that was something that the authors and the producers wanted us to do for the play. And we ended up
self-develop any. Are there any specific Harry Potter products that you came up with yourself?
Yeah, so the biggest, one of the most well-known ones I came up with was the trunk. So the one that you might see on the platform websites, platform 9 3/4 website, is the idea of a Hogwarts gift trunk. And you can fill it with up to 5 items. and it's a bit like the Fortnum and Mason gift hamper. So different seasons around different events throughout the year, people might want to send a corporate gift, something like that, or for a present, and they go on the Fortnum's website and you pick, in your price range, is it for a certain. But so I did the same thing, but for Harry Potter, and that's something that became very popular. But we ended up making everything from, plush owls to wands in the end.
Mm-hmm.
Now with the Cursed Child, that's where things really got motoring, because we opened in London in July 2016, but the next stop or the next replication for that show was to be Broadway, and I'd never operated outside the UK. But I got given the opportunity to open on Broadway as part of this theatre, and we ended up opening a 1,500 square foot Harry Potter shop, Cursed Child shop, on Broadway. And that was kind of like proof that we could do stuff internationally. And that show, we ended up building shops. So it was London, New York, Melbourne, San Francisco, and Hamburg. Hamburg, sadly, didn't get to open, or hasn't opened yet because of the pandemic, but it will open after PG. But in that time, I then received, so we were welcoming over 1 million people a year. I had a team of over 300. And
this is 1 million people a year just at King's Cross?
No, across, so we were over 1 million people in King's Cross. So across the theatres, probably over 2 million people a year.
Gosh.
Certainly over 1 million products a year. I mean, it was a real handful. But in that time,
magic. That's real magic, Jonathan.
It is magic. It is magic. But I then got a very interesting phone call from the offices of the president of Warner Brothers. Obviously, got someone's attention.
Mm-hmm.
They said that they would like to pay me a visit, and I said, "Are you sure?" I'm in Boreham Wood. They're in Beverly Hills, or they're in Los Angeles. Are they sure they want to come to Boreham Wood? Nothing wrong with Boreham Wood, by the way. I was brought up there. And they came down. So when he was next in England, the president of Warner Brothers Studios paid me a visit, and they said that they wanted to acquire my business. And that was in 2018. We did the deal in December 2018. And they offered me a job, one of the first full-time jobs that I've ever had. And as of December 2018 to November of last year, I was the senior vice president of creative and retail for Warner Brothers. And I've now since moved on from that. Yeah, but really interesting. And I've actually, for the first time in about 10 years, actually getting full night's sleeps, which is lovely, And Lara's now having to, she now sees me more than a week at a time, because over those years, certainly the last 3 years during the crazy times, I was pretty much on and off a plane every other week, Los Angeles, New York, and at first it's glamorous, but in the end it's not. It's pretty hard.
Was it a lucky escape for you then, given the fact that you managed to sell off before COVID hit, or you think the company would have done fine even during the pandemic?
That's a really good question. And there's kind of a part of you which is a little bit the entrepreneurial side of you sort of thinks, oh yeah,
no, I'll manage this one.
Yeah, we would have managed it somehow. Like what I have learned in the 30 years is that there is always a way, and that's why I think it will all come right once we get through this. Everything will right. Even though there's been slight social shifts with the way people spend, people will still want to go out. People still will want to go to visitor attractions. And for the right thing, if something is good, people will want to go. If it's not so good, they won't want to go. But I think we would have, either way, it's a little bit like the way water flows down a stream. I've sort of gone with the flow, whatever, and sort of made the most of whatever it is at that time. And I've had some failures. I've gone down some rabbit holes.
You remind me, there's a great Hasidic saying, it's you can adjust, what is it? You can't adjust the wind, but you can adjust the sails.
Yeah, exactly right. And you have to adapt to put it. And my three children, Jay is now 20, Jerry is 18, and Leah is 15. All bar and bat mitzvah at HWJC. Jay, 20, has got his own event company. Jerry is a chef. He is a Raka chef, which is Royal Academy of Culinary Arts, but at the Corinthia Hotel, which is sadly, not really
doing very much at the moment.
Not that many guests, surprisingly enough. And Leah's at JCOS. But Jay picked up on that entrepreneurial spirit in the house very young, my eldest.
Mm-hmm.
And he, set about setting up his own business and has adapted accordingly during the pandemic, and now doing sort of Zoom events and Zoom mitzvahs and all that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's right, he's adjusted his sale accordingly. And I think that's it absolutely the same in business. You have to just adapt accordingly.
I guess it helps to have a creative mind that you have. It sounds like you've got a lot of creativity going on in there.
Yeah, well, there's two things, and I know we haven't got that much time, but the one thing is that I have believed and I have learned that lots of people have ideas. Anyone can have a good idea, right? But it's what you do with that idea. It's really important that you sort of finish what you start. If it's something you believe in, go for it and never look back. If you walk in the tightrope, don't look down, because that's when it can get a bit heady. And it's really important to just obsess over the product at the end of the day, because that's what people are buying. That's important. So, as you could probably tell, I still still possess that obsessive gene, but that's something I never let go.
Jonathan, you told me already what's behind you, but I think people who are watching might be interested in what's right behind you over there. Would you like to share with everyone watching what that is on your wall? I think it's quite amazing.
Yeah, okay. So this is obviously one of the benefits of owning a film museum. So the top there is the golden ticket from Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, starring
the actual golden ticket.
That's the actual golden ticket. So that is that's the golden ticket and the Wonka bar, by the way. It's not chocolate, is it? No, that's actually polystyrene in there. There's actually that chocolate bar. Otherwise, that would have melted long ago.
Yeah, I can imagine.
So that's a Wonka bar, because everything's opposite. Sorry, it's not that easy to control that. And I'll get out of the way. So that's a Wonka bar, and then down there is that is from Sherlock Holmes. So that's Robert Downey Jr.'s violin from Sherlock Holmes.
Wow.
And up here, that is the stunt train. That's the stunt model from Mission Impossible. It's just before the helicopter gets dragged under the tunnel. Now, whilst we got 3 minutes,
let's go see the other stuff.
Now, this is one of the perks of having a film studio, and I don't have the film studio anymore, by the way. But here I still keep all of our film props. I don't know if you can see this here.
Yeah, we can see that quite clearly. Yeah. So I see a gun on the top. What's that gun on the top right?
But that is from Die Another Day. That's a James Bond gun. This is C-3PO's hand from Empire Strikes Back. That's actually Anthony Daniels, who played C-3PO in this house. He gave that to me as my 40th birthday present.
Wow.
These are scripts. That's Butch Cassidy, The Sundance Kid, Some Like It Hot, Billy Elliot scripts, and Billy Elliot's head guard and gloves. And over here, I've got, so some people might recognize these guys here. So these are Thunderbirds. There's all the Thunderbirds, the Tracy family, and there's Parker down there. You can see Parker.
I can see Parker, yeah.
And all of these puppets, they're from Aardman Animation's Pirates. So they are sort of stop motion, like sort of plasticine figures that get moved for stop motion. The background script there, and there's a little penguin. So there's a few toys around, but nothing as extravagant as the film museum. You've got to put them somewhere, otherwise.
Yeah, exactly. As you mentioned, I see we are coming up to the half an hour mark. Gosh, I can see we could have gone on for an hour and a half and still not got to the end of your all the interesting things you've got involved with. I like asking people though, and one of the ideas behind doing this is that it's really nice for the community to get to meet other members of the community. Someone said to me 2 weeks ago that after watching one of the interviews, she all of a sudden felt like she could actually approach this person and speak to them in shul, because now there's something they can talk about. Until then, they didn't really have common ground. So it's really nice to be able to introduce different members of the community to other members of the community. But I wanted to hear from you if there's anything you could share about what you may have learned over the past few months or during this whole pandemic crisis, whatever you want to call it. Anything you want to be able to share with us, just as your sort of almost closing remarks, something to think about.
Yeah, I think we have to thank our stars that we have this thing called technology. And if this was the Spanish pandemic years, the Spanish flu pandemic, all those years ago, we didn't have this luxury of communication, with the technology. And when I was working last year through the pandemic and was still head of a team, quite a large team, it was very, very important to communicate, constant communication. And whether that was physical communication, which is not that easy, but you do that very well, Rabbi. You're going around and obviously doing face-to-face. But this as a technology, to be able to just speak to people, speak to individuals, just to check up on people, just to be able to do that, just keep everything in check. We will only get through this all together. And
lots of people are saying they're very bored at the moment. You got anything to suggest?
Yeah, so we would once a week we would do like sort of Zoom events. So we would have sort of game shows and all sorts. So we would give each individual, we would go round the class, if you like, and each week or every other week, those individuals had to come up with kind of like a quiz or a game show or a bingo or whatever it was. It was something that just kept the spirits up and positive. And that's what it's about, just keeping those spirits positive and just, trying to make the best of trying to make lemonade out of, rotten lemons. That's the only thing we can do right now.
I would hope that someone that's involved with Harry Potter would come up with some magic spell, but none have been forthcoming yet, Jonathan. You've been working on that.
Sounds like Pfizer and Oxford have done that. So
yeah, okay, fair enough. Fingers crossed, exactly. Well, thank you so much for joining us, for sharing your fascinating career with the community. Pleasure. And wishing you all the best, only health and good things, and looking forward to sort of getting to know you in person one day very, very soon. But for now, have a great 2021. The community are watching, great 2021, and looking forward to seeing you all next week, same time, same place. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you very much, Rabbi. Thank you.
Pleasure.